And this is just one aspect of the process. So you're making the paint. Before that, you might even be grinding it up with the mortar and the pestle. All these little things have to happen in the studio, even, like making your own brushes. We just go out to the store and buy a brush. They made them from different hairs. Say cheese. So they use things from like a simple goat, a cow, pig, but also from like squirrels and weasels, a sable, maybe getting the tail and then the ends of the tails and then the ends of the tails of the males because they have longer hairs. Wrap a little string around that. This is the quill of a feather. That goes on your little one end, that goes on your stick, and then that's your brush. And you use different colored strings so you know that that's the squirrel and that's the weasel. And the other thing you have to do is you have to paint on something. Rembrandt painted on wood before he moved to Amsterdam. He lived in Leiden. And that sounds interesting, but somebody's got to take this piece of wood, basically slice a little piece of it off like this. That woodworker is then planing that surface, making it nice and flat, beveling this edge so it's going to fit into a frame. And then the woodworker actually puts a ground on it. And that ground started with the glue. Then they put chalk into the glue, it's what we refer to as gesso. And then a ground of color. And this is my simple yellow ochre with a little lead white in it. And that's all well and good, but somebody's doing all of that. Somebody other than Rembrandt, that's a trained woodworker. You can't do that at home. And when he gets to Amsterdam, he discovers people painting on fabric. This you can do yourself. And what they would do is they would use the same frames over and over again. That's why it's stretched in this kind of odd way. When it's finished, it's going to get cut off, sent off to a framer. They wrap it all the way around and tack that in with little nails. And what's nice with this system is over time it starts to get loose. If this is one continuous string, it can actually be pulled again all the way around so that it's tighter. And then it's going to get tight in the beginning because they put that glue on again. And that glue, that's a rabbit skin glue. So here's our little rabbit skin. What they do is they cook that down, you let it dry out. You can crunch that up to these little crystals. And kind of like making Nescafe. Add hot water, stir. And then with a knife like this, you're taking that warm glue and putting it onto the surface. And that's going to separate, the paint. Separate the paint from the fabric, because you don't want that paint resting on your fabric. It will rot the surface and you'll feel it's not so interesting. But just a little protection again. And we think of the painting starting with that gesso. Okay, that was that white canvas. Maybe a pencil sketch and you color things in, but Rembrandt doesn't paint that way. He actually starts with paint. So that burnt sienna works very nicely. You take a knife like this, take some of that fresh paint out, and drag that across the surface. You can put a real thin layer on, it's going to fill up the irregularity of your fabric, make it nice and flat, just like that piece of wood. And that burnt sienna, it dries overnight. I dragged this on, and the next day it was dry, so I could start painting. And then Rembrandt doesn't start with that pencil sketch, he actually sketches with paint. So that's my little example here. So my piece of wood, I grounded it with my yellow ochre. So that's what you see here, what you see here. Then I took some black paint, white paint, mixed them together so I could get a little gray too, and did all that sketching besides the blue and the red with just the black, white, and gray. So I can make all that imagery with just those two colors. They're kind of cheap. They'll dry quickly also. So the next day I can come back, make things lighter, darker, lighter, darker. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to make up some of the real expensive things like that lapis lazuli. I'll make up just a tiny little bit. I know it needs to go right there. I can paint the window and I'm not going to be wasting anything. And I might even have like 2 or 3 paintings that I'm working at the same time. So I'm using up all of that glue, so nothing is getting wasted. On the audio tour, they talk about the pig's bladder. That's how they store paint. You can make up a bunch and drop it in there. When you wanted to paint, you could poke a hole in this and squeeze out what you want. But if it's lapis lazuli, it's really expensive. You might not want to do that. One of these cheap colors, like the yellow ochre, that's nice for some student. You might want to discourage them with that. Sit there, make the whole day, fill up those bladders full of pigs, or pig bladders full of paint. So you had to learn, again, all of these different things. And Rembrandt's, going and experimenting his whole life. So that ground situation, he takes that ground and then starts covering it with his own colors. And those colors are now corresponding to paintings, the paintings he's doing, and the light that he's trying to bring out, and actually using some of that image in the final product. So painting on panels, painting on these fabrics, even does some wild things like painting on copper. And what he does here is he actually covers the copper with gold leaf, paints on it, and then uses some of that gold leaf actually in the image itself. And then scraping away with the back of his brush some of the paint, exposing the gold leaf to now have that part of the image. So really a lifetime experimentation. He makes something like 360 different paintings, and they're all a little bit different. He's trying something this time, doing something else that time. One of my favorite examples is the Jewish bride here. So it's kind of hard to get all this stuff up at the same time. So this red, and it looks more dramatic when you actually see the original. But you can't just get that red by taking that red and putting it onto a white canvas. Okay, so here you're going to put down a base of some red ochre. Then you're going to cover maybe your red ochre with your vermilion. That's the mercury-sulfur combination. And then here what Rembrandt does is he uses the cochineal. He actually puts some cherry tree resin, the little sapper pitch from a cherry tree, that gum into that to make it a little bit more sticky. Glazes over that vermilion, lets that dry, glazes over it, lets that dry. Over and over again, so there's multiple colored layers of oil that sit on that sit on this. And that's what makes it so dramatic. And this is the postcard, so it's not so dramatic. But the actual one is pretty interesting. And what's also interesting, if you look at this painting from the side, here, on the sleeve, that sleeve is really in relief. It's coming out. And they think what Rembrandt does is in your little paint buckets, like the thing over there that has the brushes in, but also what's happening here is that paint will dry and turn into plastic. So they think that he just took off some old used paint. That's what I did here. Just stuck it onto the canvas where the arm is, and now take some of the yellow, the white paint, and stipples on top of that. Because that paint, if it's really thick, it's going to take a long time to dry. So that was a way to create a lot of texture, but not have to do all that waiting for that thick paint to dry. And the last little thing that needs to happen with your painting is you need to finish it with a varnish. And that's what they were doing to protect the paint. So that way over time, the dirty world is sticking onto the varnish, and it's not actually sticking onto the paint. And what the varnish is, you start with pine tree resin. It will come from Portugal in Rembrandt's time. This is distilled like alcohol. And my liquid, that's turpentine. Then I take my turpentine, I mix it with more pine tree resin. I cook that. I might add some beeswax to that. People have secret recipes. They strain off that material. But what's left, that's my varnish. And that's how I'm going to finish my painting. So that resin varnish is put onto the surface. It's going to give it a little bit more luster, a little bit more depth. And again, that protection, because the world will stick on that over time. In 50, 60 years, you can come back with some turpentine, clean that varnish away, and then put a new one on. So that's what they're doing when they're cleaning paintings. And the Rembrandt downstairs, that's what happened with that one. So there were 2 thick layers of varnish on it. That's why in the 60s people didn't think it was an actual Rembrandt painting. But after removing all of those layers of varnish, they discovered it was, yeah, a good painting. And what happened was Rembrandt painted it, it got varnished, and then later on somebody said, it doesn't look good, let's just put more varnish on it. Okay, because that was an idea at one time. Well, more was not better. And after a year of restoring it, they took all the varnish off. That's why it looks so nice. So, did I leave anything out? Is there something on the table that is still leaving a mystery for you?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Getting the, like, if there's a candlelight, just bringing a small light out of the picture to get that. Underneath, raising on top to get that.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And went to quite hard to the picture.
I
Turn the
don't,
lights up.
I don't know if I have a perfect example of one of them. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, well, like here. But what makes her glow is the fact that there is, and the darkness around her. It sounds kind of strange, but if it's, yeah, it really makes it pop out. It makes it look three-dimensional. So people think, oh, well, Rembrandt's paintings are so dark, but it's that contrast creating all of that three dimension. So if you don't have a certain amount of darkness, you don't get that look. Yeah, exactly. And that's really what Rembrandt liked to play with and experiment.
This is like that.
This is
resin you take there?
well, this is actually the surface texture of here. Yeah. So you can see, yeah, it's the end.
Not just the painting.
Yeah, yeah. And again, these are just the photocopies. The original things, then you,
I'm ready.
yeah, and you think, okay, now I understand. Just by looking at the original. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, my pleasure.